The jungle of Virella Prime was never silent. Even in the still heat of midday, life moved and breathed in every shadow. The trees rose like living towers, their roots twisting into the earth like coiled serpents, while broad leaves dripped with dew that had never known the touch of wind. In this wild place, there was one rule: hunt or be hunted. Karis stood high on a branch, her four clawed hands gripping the bark with ease. She was the queen of this world's predators, tall, powerful, and built for the chase. Her black and crimson hide blended perfectly into the shadows, and the spines along her forearms were sharp enough to tear through bone. Her kind had ruled these jungles for generations, and she had never known defeat. Every hunt ended with her, claws wet and her hunger satisfied. Today, she had no specific prey in mind. She moved only for the pleasure of the hunt. The thrill of stalking, the slow tightening of the trap, the moment her prey realized it was too late. For Karis, hunting was not only survival, it was art. A sudden rumble in the sky made her pause. It was no storm. From above the canopy, a streak of fire tore across the heavens, trailing smoke like a comet. Karis followed its path with narrowed eyes until it vanished into the dense green far to the east. A moment later, the jungle shook with the sound of impact. Something, or someone, had just fallen from the stars. Her mandibles clicked in anticipation. This was no ordinary prey. The crash could mean many things: a wounded animal from another world, an escaped slave, or perhaps a soldier separated from their pack. No matter what it was, it had entered her territory. That meant it belonged to her. She leapt down from the branch, landing silently on the mossy ground. Her long legs carried her swiftly through the undergrowth, every movement smooth and silent. As she ran, she imagined the hunt ahead, how the strange creature would try to hide, how it would tire, how fear would cloud its movements, until the end came swiftly. After an hour of travel, the smell of scorched metal reached her nostrils. She slowed, slipping behind a thick curtain of vines. Through the gaps, she saw the wreckage, a small drop pod half buried in the soft earth. Steam hissed from the cracked metal as if the machine itself were exhaling its last breath. A figure stepped out. It was unlike anything Karis had seen before. Tall, but not as tall as she was. 2 arms, 2 legs, covered in strange armor that looked battered yet functional. The creature's skin was hidden, but its movements spoke volumes, cautious, deliberate, and unafraid. It carried a weapon, though smaller than the heavy blasters Karis had seen on other off-world hunters. Its head turned slowly, scanning the jungle as though it could see into every shadow. Karis crouched low, studying the stranger. It moved with a kind of confidence she usually saw only in predators. But that was impossible. This was her jungle. Every predator here knew to fear her. The stranger knelt beside the pod, pulling a device from its belt. It emitted a soft clicking noise. Karis didn't understand its purpose, but she didn't need to. All she needed to know was that this creature was alone. Alone meant vulnerable. Vulnerable meant prey. She began her approach. The jungle had many sounds, but Karis knew how to move without adding a single one. Her feet found only soft ground. Her claws touched only bark and vine. The stranger didn't seem to notice her at first. He was focused on the wreckage, scanning it, then glancing at a small screen on his wrist. When she was close enough, she tested him. A single pebble rolled from her claw and tapped against a root. The sound was small, barely more than a whisper, but the reaction was instant. The stranger's head turned sharply. His eyes, visible through the visor's glare, swept across the trees until they landed exactly where she hid. Karis froze. He didn't raise his weapon. Instead, he shifted his stance, slightly wider, balanced, like someone preparing for movement in any direction. It was the kind of readiness Karis expected from experienced hunters, not prey, A strange sensation stirred in her chest. Not fear. No, she had never feared anything in her life, but something close to curiosity. She circled him, moving wide so the foliage hid her from direct sight. Each time she shifted position, the stranger adjusted too, as if he could sense her movements through instinct alone. It was a silent game of mirrors. For long minutes, neither made a move. Finally, the human, for she guessed that's what he was, turned his back on her. Not in carelessness, but as if inviting her to strike. Her pride flared hot. She would not let this outsider mock her. Kairos tightened her muscles, ready to lunge, but then she stopped. Something about the way he stood, the way he glanced, over his shoulder for just a fraction of a second, told her the truth. This was no frightened prey. This was a challenge. The corners of her mouth pulled back in a silent, predatory grin. She would enjoy this hunt. And when it ended, the jungle would remember who its true apex predator was. Kairos followed the human at a careful distance. He moved through the jungle without fear, stepping over roots and ducking under vines as if he had walked this path 100 times before. She had hunted off-worlders before, but most of them stumbled in this dense, humid world. They tripped, they sweated too much, they panicked at the sounds of predators in the shadows. But this one seemed to listen to the jungle, not fear it. She kept to the treetops for now, her 4 limbs carrying her silently from branch to branch. From here, she had a clear view of him. The human paused now and then to kneel beside a plant, sometimes touching the soil or snapping off a leaf to smell it. Why would prey waste time studying plants? It made no sense. When he came to a shallow stream, Kairos saw her chance. The soft earth there would muffle her landing. She climbed down the trunk of a wide tree and crept closer, every step measured. The water lapped gently at the stones as the human crouched beside it, filling a small container. His weapon was strapped to his back. Vulnerable. Perfect. She crouched low, muscles tightening, ready to spring. But the moment she leapt forward, the human twisted sideways, letting her pass by in midair. Kairos landed hard in the mud, claws sinking deep into a fallen log. It had been placed there deliberately. She snarled quietly in her own language. The trap was not to harm her, but to throw off her balance. She spun, expecting him to aim his weapon at her, but instead he simply stepped away from the water and kept walking. He didn't even look back. Her pride burned hotter than the sun overhead. No prey had ever dared to turn its back on her after escaping an attack. This wasn't a fight to him. This was a game. She would prove it was not. From then on, she tracked him with more caution. He was clever, yes, but no one could outlast her in her own territory. The jungle was her blood, her breath. It would work for her, not him. Hours passed. The air grew heavy with the smell of rain, though the sky above the canopy stayed dim. The human seemed to be following. No clear path, yet he moved as though he had a destination. Each time Kairos drew near, something stopped her. A loose branch that would crack underfoot. A patch of thornweed exactly where she would have stepped. Once, she spotted a vine strung, low across the path, just waiting for her leg to catch on it. Every trap was small, almost harmless. But they slowed her down. They kept her from making a clean attack. Near dusk, the jungle began to change. Insects chirped louder. Long shadows slid across the undergrowth. Kairos knew the night hunters would soon wake, and even she respected some of them enough to avoid their hunting grounds. The human did not quicken his pace. Instead, he found a clearing near a tall tree with wide roots and began to work. From her vantage point above, Kairos watched him gather fallen branches, stacking them carefully in a small circle of stones. Then, to her surprise, he took a small metallic, object from his pack and struck it against another. A spark flashed. A moment later, a small fire came to life. Karis tilted her head. Fire was dangerous in the jungle. The smoke could draw other predators. But the human seemed unconcerned. He set a small pot above the flames and poured water into it, adding strange pieces of dried plants and what smelled like meat. The scent reached her, warm, rich, unlike anything in Varella's wilds. Her stomach gave an involuntary growl. She had eaten before the hunt, but the aroma was compelling. Too compelling. Against her better judgment, she moved closer, climbing down the tree and stepping silently across the clearing's edge. The human didn't look at her. He stirred the pot slowly, letting the smell drift out even stronger. She crouched low, drawn in. She could see the texture of the food now. Steam curling into the air. It was within reach. A sharp snap broke her focus. Something tightened around her ankle. A vine loop, pulled by a hidden counterweight. In an instant, Karis was yanked upward, dangling upside down from a branch. Her spine scraping against the bark. She twisted, growling in fury. The human stood a short distance away, looking up at her with calm eyes. He didn't laugh. He didn't taunt her. Instead, he stepped forward, pulled a knife from his belt, and cut the vine. She dropped lightly to the ground, ready to attack, but he had already turned his back, picking up his pack as if she were no threat at all. He walked away into the deepening shadows. Karis stood frozen for a long moment. Her instincts screamed at her to leap and end it now, but another voice, one she almost never listened to, whispered that this was something different. He had caught her, and then he had. Let her go. Why? Her claws flexed in the dirt. The hunt was no longer about food. It was no longer about defending her territory. Now it was about understanding. This human was strange prey, and strange prey required a new kind of hunt. With a low, determined hiss, Karis followed him into the night. Night fell fast on Varela Prime. The jungle that had been green and gold in the day turned into a place of shifting black shapes and silver glimmers. Mist rose from the ground, curling between the roots like living spirits. Karis moved silently, her eyes adjusting easily to the darkness. This was her time. Her world was most alive under the moon. The human, however, didn't seem to rush for shelter. He stopped in a small hollow where the trees leaned close overhead, their leaves forming a roof of shadow. Then, with calm movements, he began arranging more branches, just as he had at dusk. This time, the fire he built was even smaller, shielded on 3 sides by stones. It barely gave off light, yet enough heat to cook something. Karis lingered in the branches above, watching. She could smell the meat again, fresh this time, not dried. The scent cut through the other smells of the jungle, even the sharp tang of the night hunters waking in the distance. Her stomach knotted in hunger, but she forced herself to stay still. He was baiting her. She knew it. She had used the same trick herself many times, a tempting smell to draw prey closer. But she was no fool. She would not walk into his trap a second time. The jungle around them shifted. Far away, something howled. A deep, echoing sound that made the branches tremble. Closer, the rustle of many feet passed through the undergrowth. Karis recognized it instantly. A pack of razor beasts. 4-legged predators, covered in bristling quills, sharp enough to pierce metal. Even she avoided them unless she had the advantage of height or numbers. The human looked up from his fire. He didn't panic. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small device shaped like a horn. When he pressed a button, it let out a shrill, high-pitched cry, nothing like the call of any animal here. The sound bounced between the trees, making it impossible to tell where it had come from. The razor beasts paused, confused. Then they split up, half the pack moving toward the false sound. The others, less cautious, pushed toward the hollow. The human didn't reach for his gun. Instead, he moved sideways, placing the small fire between himself and the beasts. When the first one stepped into the light, its quills rattling, he didn't attack. He threw a small pouch into the flames. The fire flared, sending up a burst of thick, stinging smoke. The beasts recoiled with snarls, their sensitive noses overwhelmed. Before they could recover, the human was already moving away, vanishing into the trees. Caris dropped silently from her branch, landing in the darkness a few lengths behind him. She had to admit it. The human was clever. He didn't try to fight the pack head-on. He used their senses against them. That was a predator's thinking. She followed as he made his way deeper into the jungle, his path twisting to avoid the densest areas. Eventually, he slowed and came to rest near a large, hollow tree. It looked like a safe place to hide for the night, shielded from the wind and out of sight. Caris thought about waiting until he was asleep before striking. But something in her gut told her this was still part of his plan. Instead, she circled the area, checking for traps. Her eyes found nothing. No vines, no bait, no hidden pits. Strange. She moved closer. A sudden snap of tension on her leg stopped her short. A loop of woven fiber had tightened around her ankle, pulling it sharply toward the ground. It didn't lift her into the air like before. Instead, it pinned her leg in place. Before she could cut it, a figure stepped from the shadows. The human. He was holding the vine in one hand, keeping her trapped with his weight and strength. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other. She expected him to attack now, to use his weapon. But instead, he reached into a pouch and cut the loop himself, freeing her. The moment her leg was loose, she spun around, but he was already gone, disappearing into the trees like a ghost. The only trace he left behind was the faint sound of leaves shifting in the distance. Caris stayed still for a long moment. Her breathing was heavier than she liked to admit. It had been so long since she'd been the one caught, the one outmaneuvered. This human was not prey, if anything. He was hunting her. The thought made her lips curl into a grin. No one had ever dared turn the game on her before. No one had ever been bold or skilled enough to try. Far above, the moon slid from behind a cloud, bathing the jungle in pale, silver light. Caris looked toward where the human had vanished. She could follow him now, track him, and end this strange challenge quickly, but deep down, she didn't want it to end. This was no longer just about victory. This was about learning what made this strange creature so dangerous, and if she had to let herself be drawn into his game to find out, then so be it. She leapt into the branches, her claws biting into the bark, and set off after him again. But this time, her movements were not only those of a hunter, they were also the movements of someone watching, studying, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Somewhere ahead, the human moved through the jungle, his steps light, his head turning slightly as if he could feel her following. Neither of them rushed, neither of them spoke, but both knew this was far from over. The hunt had changed. Dawn crept over Varela Prime, washing the jungle in pale gold light. Mist clung to the ground, curling between tree roots and under thick ferns. The air was cooler now, but still heavy with the scent of damp earth. Caris moved through the branches above, her claws digging silently into the bark. She had been following the human all night. Several times he had stopped to rest, and each time she had considered ending the hunt right there. But something always stopped her. Some part of her wanted to see what he would do next. The human. She had learned his scent well by now. Was strong for his size, but not the way she was strong. He didn't have claws or fangs. He didn't move with raw power. Instead, he moved with caution, with thought. and somehow that made him harder to catch than any prey she had ever faced. By mid-morning, they came to a ridge overlooking a wide stretch of broken jungle. Trees lay snapped in half, their trunks scorched black. The ground was littered with pieces of twisted metal half sunk into the soil. Carice crouched in the shadows, watching as the human knelt beside one of the metal shards. He studied it for a long time. Then he took a small device from his belt, a screen that glowed faintly. Strange symbols moved across it as he turned the shard in his hands. Carice narrowed her eyes. She recognized the smell now. The metal was not from his drop pod. It was from something older and far more dangerous. She moved lower, creeping closer through the leaves. From here, she could see the shape of one of the wrecks, a drone, its insect-like legs twisted and broken. A faint red light still blinked in its ruined head. Her spines rose in warning. She had seen these machines before, though only from a distance. They came from the sky in great swarms, stripping whole areas bare, trees, animals, even stone, leaving behind only lifeless ground. They were not hunters. They were harvesters. The human looked toward the horizon, following something only he could see on his screen. Carice followed his gaze. There, almost hidden in the green, a tall metal spike rose from the earth. It pulsed faintly with light, and even at this distance, she could hear the faint hum of power. A beacon. Her stomach tightened. She knew what it meant. That beacon was calling more of the machines. When they arrived, nothing in this part of the jungle would survive. The human stood, slipping the device back into his pack. He didn't look toward her hiding place, but somehow she knew he was aware of her. He began moving toward the beacon. Carice dropped to the ground ahead of him, landing lightly on the moss. The human stopped a few paces away. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. "You know," he said at last, his voice calm but edged with purpose. His words were in galactic common, rough in her ears, but understandable. He tapped the air in the direction of the beacon. "More are coming. We shut it down, or we both die." Carice tilted her head, mandibles shifting. She did not like working with others. She had no need for allies in her own territory, but she had also never fought the harvesters directly. One predator could not stop a swarm. She gave a short, sharp nod. The human's mouth curved in the smallest hint of a smile. He turned and began moving through the trees, this time not trying to shake her from his trail. She followed easily, her long strides matching his shorter but steady pace. The closer they got to the beacon, the more wreckage they found. Some machines were smashed, their parts scattered. Clear signs the human had fought them before. Others were intact but lifeless, their power drained. And yet, each step forward brought the hum of the beacon louder. At one point, they came to a narrow ravine. The humans scanned the walls, then began climbing with a careful, deliberate rhythm. Carice scaled it in moments, watching him from above until he reached the top. He glanced at her, breath quick but controlled. No complaint, no sign of weakness. When the beacon finally came into full view, Carice stopped in the shadows. It was taller than she had expected, a spire of black metal covered in moving red lights. At its base, several active drones crawled in tight circles, their sensors sweeping the area. Any direct approach would be noticed instantly. The human crouched beside her, studying the pattern of the drones. "They scan in a loop," he said. "Gap every 12 seconds. That's our window." Carice bared her teeth in approval. She would take the lead. Her speed could carry her across the open ground before the machines completed their next sweep. She pointed to herself, then toward the beacon's base, miming a tearing motion. He nodded and held up a small object, a block of dark material with a blinking light. Explosives. The plan was simple. She would draw the drones away. He would plant the device. It was a predator's kind of plan. She slipped from the trees, moving low and fast. The nearest drone turned toward her, its red sensor light flaring. Before it could signal the others, she slammed into it, tearing through its metal legs with a single sweep of her claws. Two more came at her, their limbs clicking in a frenzy. She dodged between them, her movements sharp and precise, leading them away from the beacon. Behind her, she caught a glimpse of the human sprinting toward the spire, dropping to one knee to work at its base. He moved with speed but also care, pressing something into the metal, adjusting it, setting the timer. Drone lunged for her. She caught its head in both upper arms and twisted until metal shrieked. She let it fall, scanning for more. But already the hum of the beacon was rising, almost urgent now. She realized with a jolt what that meant. More were on the way. They had minutes, maybe less. The human finished his work and looked toward her, raising his hand. She turned and bounded toward him, leaping over the wreckage as the first shapes appeared in the sky, distant but closing fast. They had started this as hunter and prey. Now they ran side by side. Zira crouched on the twisted metal beam, eyes locked on the shadow moving below. The jungle of this shattered alien city was quiet except for the drip of condensation from high girders. She felt her claws tighten around the rusted steel. The human had entered the ruins at dawn, and she had been following him ever since. For days she had been the hunter, always one step ahead, always unseen. But something was wrong now. Each time she moved, she noticed subtle signs. A disturbed patch of dust where he had stepped, a fragment of foliage bent at the same angle she had passed. It was as if he was tracking her at the same time. Her pride kept her moving forward. She told herself she was still the apex predator here, but there was a small, sharp thought in the back of her mind. What if he knows I'm here? Below, the human, named Captain Elias Carter, stopped and crouched. He touched the ground, fingers brushing over an almost invisible trail of claw marks. He didn't smile, but there was a faint shift in his posture, the kind a soldier makes when he knows the game has changed. Zira tilted her head. His movements were deliberate, careful. He carried no heavy weapon, only a compact energy pistol holstered at his side and a small pack strapped to his back. Yet he walked like he didn't need anything else. That calmness unsettled her more than the weapon. She shifted silently along the beam, but a faint metallic ping betrayed her position. Elias looked up, not startled, not even surprised, and locked eyes with her. It was the first time they had seen each other directly. His gaze was steady, unreadable, and it made Zira's muscles tense. Most prey looked away, tried to hide their fear. He didn't. He just stood there, as if he had been expecting this meeting. "You've been following me," Elias said, his voice calm but carrying in the still air. Zira's crest twitched. "And you've been letting me?" He didn't deny it. "You're fast, quiet, but you're not invisible. I've dealt with hunters before." Something about the way he said hunters made her feel like he wasn't only talking about alien predators. Before she could reply, the ground beneath him cracked. A section of the ruined floor gave way, and a swarm of small, chittering creatures poured out. Their bodies were insect-like but covered in jagged, crystalline armor. The scavengers of this city, fast, vicious, and always hungry. Zira reacted. First, leaping down with claws extended. She slashed through two of the creatures before they reached Elias. He drew his pistol and fired short, precise bursts, each shot punching clean through the scavenger's armor. They fought back to back, without speaking, her claws and his weapon moving in perfect rhythm. In the chaos, Zira caught herself glancing at him, realizing he wasn't just surviving. He was controlling the fight, forcing the creatures toward choke points, using the terrain to their advantage. When the last scavenger twitched and went, still the silence returned. Elias reloaded calmly. "You're good." he said without looking at her. Zira bared her teeth. You fight like someone who's been hunted before. He finally met her eyes. I have. But I've also learned. The hunter's advantage doesn't last forever. Sometimes the predator becomes the prey. The words made her pulse quicken. She wasn't sure if it was a challenge or a warning. For the first time since she began following him, Zira realized she didn't fully understand who was leading this dance anymore. Above them, in the upper shadows of the ruins, something large moved, heavier than either of them, watching from a place they couldn't yet see. The hunt wasn't over, but now neither of them knew who it was truly after. The sound came again, slow, heavy, deliberate. Both Zira and Elias froze. The air in the ruins shifted, carrying with it a faint vibration through the steel beams. It was the kind of sound you felt in your chest before you heard it clearly. Zira's senses sharpened instantly. She knew this was no scavenger. This was something larger, older. Elias's eyes scanned the upper shadows. We're not alone, he murmured. Zira almost laughed. We've never been alone. The shape finally moved into view, a massive predator, taller than any being she had hunted. Its body was sleek but powerful, covered in plates of bone-like armor, and its eyes glowed faintly with a pale blue light. It crawled down a leaning support beam with terrifying grace, its long tail curling behind it like a whip. Zira's claws extended, but her mind was already calculating. This creature had no fear scent, no hesitation. It moved like a ruler in its own territory. Elias stepped slightly to the side, lowering his voice. That thing's been watching us. It waited until we were tired. She didn't like agreeing with a human, but he was right. The scavenger swarm had been nothing but a warm-up. The predator dropped to the ground with a deep thud, cracking the tiles under its weight. Its head tilted, studying them both. Zira growled low. I can take it. Elias didn't look at her. Not alone. The creature struck without warning, lunging toward Elias with blinding speed. Zira reacted instantly, slashing at its flank to draw its attention away. Her claws scraped the armor with a sound like metal on stone, barely leaving a mark. Elias rolled aside, drawing a small cylindrical device from his belt. He pressed a button, and it emitted a high-pitched pulse. The predator froze mid-step, its head jerking slightly as if the sound disoriented it. That won't last long, Elias said sharply. We move! They sprinted through the ruins, weaving between fallen pillars and shattered walls. The predator recovered faster than Elias expected, its heavy steps pounding after them. Zira leapt onto a broken archway, hoping to slow it from above, but the predator swiped upward with its tail. The impact knocked her sideways, and she barely managed to catch herself on a ledge before hitting the ground. Elias fired several precise shots at its joints, forcing it to shift its weight. The hits didn't pierce deep, but they slowed its advance enough for Zira to drop down beside him. This way, she hissed, leading him toward a narrow section of the ruins where the walls closed in. The predator followed, its body scraping against the walls as it forced its way through. That's when Elias saw the plan. The tight space limited its movement. Zira sprang forward, using the walls themselves as running surfaces, darting from side to slash at the weaker sections between its armor plates. Elias timed his shots with her strikes, aiming where her claws exposed vulnerable flesh. The predator roared, a sound that made the walls tremble. With one massive swing, it smashed the wall beside Elias, sending chunks of stone flying. He stumbled but stayed on his feet, quickly reloading. Tell me you've got an end to this. Zira's eyes narrowed. I don't end hunts. I finish them. With a sudden leap, she landed on the predator's back, driving her claws deep into the seam between its shoulder plates. The creature thrashed violently, trying to throw her off. Elias seized the moment, aiming at the same spot and firing a full burst. The combined attack finally broke through. The predator staggered, its movement slowing, until it collapsed with a heavy crash that shook the ground. Zira jumped off, landing lightly beside Elias. She was breathing hard but stood tall, her pride intact. Elias lowered his weapon but kept it ready. "You were right. You can take it, with help." She gave him a sharp look, but there was no insult in his tone. In fact, there was something else there. Respect. For a long moment, neither spoke. The jungle noises slowly returned around them, as if the ruins themselves were exhaling after holding their breath. Then Elias said quietly, "This wasn't the only one." Zira tilted her head. "You mean?" A distant roar echoed through the ruins. Not one voice, several. Her claws flexed. "Good. I was getting bored." Elias checked his weapon. "Then we'd better make sure we're hunting, and not being hunted." They started moving together through the shadows, side by side this time. The ruins still held many dangers, but now there was a strange, unspoken understanding between them, an alliance forged in the heat of survival, even if neither would admit it aloud. And somewhere above, unseen eyes watched them both, deciding how the next hunt would begin. The jungle was quiet. Too quiet. Karath stood in the clearing, her eyes fixed on the edge of the tree line. Somewhere beyond the dark leaves, Daniel was moving. She could feel it. The battle over the past 2 days had destroyed much of the terrain. Broken trees lay scattered, their trunks scarred by energy burns. The air still carried the faint smell of charred soil. Karath had chased Daniel relentlessly, but the human always managed to slip away. And now, she knew he was ready to make his final move. Karath flexed her claws. "You cannot win, human," she said aloud, her voice carrying into the stillness. "I am the strongest hunter in this galaxy." From somewhere in the shadows, a calm voice answered. "Strong doesn't always win." The words echoed in her mind. She felt a flicker of irritation. He was playing with her again, using that strange human confidence that never seemed to break. A rustle to her left made her spin sharply, but nothing was there. Then another sound, this time behind her. She turned, scanning, but the jungle seemed empty. Her instincts screamed that danger was near, yet she couldn't see it. "Enough of this," she growled. She activated her wrist scanner, sending a pulse of energy that revealed heat signatures nearby. One appeared in front of her, moving slowly toward the trees. Karath smiled. "Got you." She leapt forward, ready to strike, only to discover a trap. The heat source was a small device wrapped in leaves, generating artificial warmth. Before she could react, a net made from strong woven fibers dropped from above, wrapping tightly around her arms and legs. She roared, tearing at it, but the fibers didn't break easily. Daniel stepped out from the shadows, his boots silent on the jungle floor. He was holding a strange-looking launcher, one she had never seen before. "You think being the apex predator means being faster or stronger," he said, his voice steady. "But sometimes it means thinking 2 steps ahead." Karath strained against the net, her muscles flexing. "You believe this trap will stop me?" she snarled. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He moved closer, his eyes locked on hers. "No," he said finally. "This just slows you down. Long enough for me to make sure you don't hurt anyone else." She felt her pride twist inside her. This human, this fragile creature, had not only survived her hunt, but had turned it against her. She had thought of him as prey. Now she wasn't so sure. The net began to loosen as she pulled harder, breaking a few strands. Daniel noticed and quickly pressed a control on the launcher. A burst of foam sprayed onto the net, hardening instantly and locking her in place again. "What is this?" she demanded. "A little human invention," he replied. It's light enough to carry, easy to make, and strong enough to hold something 10 times my weight. That's the thing about us. We make tools for everything. Karath stared at him. In her culture, strength was measured by personal power, by claw, by tooth, by raw muscle. But this human didn't fight like that. He used his mind, his patience, and the environment. And he won. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Daniel lowered the launcher. I'm not here to kill you, Karath. But you have to understand, humans aren't prey. We adapt, we survive, even against predators like you. His words cut deeper than any weapon. She thought of the other species she had hunted across worlds. None had ever turned the hunt around. None had looked at her with such steady defiance. Daniel stepped back, tapping a device on his wrist. A small drone descended from above, hovering with a quiet hum, its mechanical arm extended, grabbing the net to lift her gently off the ground. I'm sending you back to your people, he said. Tell them what you learned here. Karath wanted to snarl, to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she studied the human's face, looking for weakness. She found none. There was only determination. And perhaps a trace of respect. As the drone carried her away, she spoke quietly. Perhaps you are a predator after all. Daniel watched her vanish into the trees, the sounds of the jungle slowly returning. He let out a long breath, finally allowing himself to relax. He picked up his gear and started walking toward the extraction point. The mission was over, but he knew that somewhere out there, Karath would remember this hunt, and she would tell others. Humans weren't the easy prey the galaxy thought they were, and that was exactly the message he wanted to send.